Welcome to Haunted Maple. I'm now going to continue a story that we had started. It was regarding Amy and a house that she had bought and her neighbor Vera. This wasn't his time. He would have to wait. There was something within the property, the house, preventing his step beyond the gate. Having not received a clear answer from Vera, she took precautions. Amy had walked the boundaries, stating nothing beyond this world was to enter. In a restful sleep, Amy stayed comfortable. Nothing would disturb her at this moment. In his ragged clothes he stood and growled in anger, his teeth glinting in the moonlight. His fingers dug into the cedar. In a heavy whisper he stated, "I'll be back," then snorted in anger again, before turning round to leave. Late night was slowly becoming early morning. The dark sky was with millions of stars was lightening. Stars were disappearing as the horizon changed to orange and yellow. Shadows of a different type stretched across the neighborhood yards. Bare branches looked like fingers reaching for that beautiful blue above. These lost souls were sucked back into the ground. The earth sealed and the pebbles put back in place. It looked as though it had never been disturbed. But the ground above him rumbled, then heaved as though it was breathing. It was barely noticeable at first. The plants moved not even an inch, though as the morning progressed, the inch was now a labored foot. A beetle scurried across the unmarked grave. All movement ceased. His anger was too strong, but his need overshadowed it all. He forced a calm to conceal his potion. Amy decided on a hike this Christmas Saturday morning. She needed to get the lay of the land. She drove to the lot for parking at the entrance of the park. The sun was shining, making autumn colors jewel-like. So rich they were, she imagined a necklace made from them. The calm breeze played with leaves still clinging to their branches. They were not willing to leave their home with a magnificent view. Amy stood gazing at the beauty surrounding her, deep breaths of fresh air to rejuvenate her soul. This would be her final move. Studying the map provided at the entrance, she chose her route. It wasn't going to be a long first hike, but a good one all the same. Sunlight traveled through the branches to the forest floor, warming the ground it touched. Shades of green, gray, brown, and autumn colors were magical. They came alive nearly instantly in her mind. Not but the sweet song of birds above and the chatter of the squirrels surrounded her. Dry leaves of brown crunched beneath her shoes, each step mindful of the uneven ground. Rocks and roots covered her path from time to time. The wind swept through the trees, singing as it did when she was a child. Such wonderful memories. Time with her parents. Amy was lost in her magical thoughts. She felt the love and wonderment once again. Those emotions were never far from her. She smiled, looking up to the sky. peeking down on her. An old valued friend, the one that never failed her. Amy sat for a drink of water after traversing for an hour. Time had gotten away from her, and she didn't care. It was then she faintly heard the sound. Squinting her eyes, she attempted to place it. That sounds like a rusty fan. She listened a moment more. It is a fan, but where and why would there be one out here? I've walked for an hour. She looked back. I'm so far in. Her curiosity was aroused. Placing her open water bottle in the side pocket of her backpack, Amy pushed herself up from the rock that she had been sitting on. Listening carefully, all other sounds gave way to only the rusty echo. Her concentration was astounding. A striped skunk could have crossed her, and she would have never known. The sound grew loud, but more intermittent. Was it coming? Was it coaxing her progress to it? You can imagine her surprise when the gravel turned into an opening. There was overgrown asphalt in front of her. Moss and weeds had taken their land back. A large cinder block building stood vacant. It was easy to see it hadn't been inhabited for some time. Amy made her way slowly round the perimeter until she found it. In an old office window, she thought at first. Looking more closely, it was encased by cement. An exhaust fan. The metal had indeed rusted. If it weren't for the breeze, it would have ceased years ago. She began to look for a way in. There was a door slightly ajar. Placing her ear to the opening, she heard voices in whisper. It wasn't a couple. It sounded at least like 4, if not more. Amy listened more intently, placing half of her head inside the opening. It must be water dripping from the roof. That is always mistaken for voices, she said to herself. Hello? She called out, in case she was wrong. When no response came, Amy was sure she was correct. Forcing her body between the door and its frame, she pushed with all she had. The door moved ever so slightly. Another hard shove, and the space was for her to enter. It was only a few moments for her green eyes to adjust. The inside was massive and cold. The damp crept through her in seconds. The permeating odor was a mixture indeed. The damp cement, oil, and rotting cardboard, and dead animal. There were sections of the floor thick with pigeon feces. Above her head the birds flew, disturbed by her presence. She heard the soft cooing of mating. Please don't poo, she called up to them. I'll leave you alone. Amy veered off to keep to her word. The machines were substantial. Paint had been peeling, exposing the iron molded workings underneath. The rust was a deep orange, almost brown. As Amy continued to move about the building, she realized the inside had never been touched. It was amazing to hear that this could happen. Every other place she had ever come across was destroyed by mindless teens and people with nothing better to do. People who did not realize the history, the worth of what was before them. Amy gave a shiver, looking to the walls for an open window. Finding none, she was content, believing there must have been somewhere in the building close by. She gave another shiver, then continued on. Coming across a filing cabinet, she carefully slid open a drawer. At least 60 files had been left behind. One by one, she opened them. Total information on the employees mentioned. Date of birth, marital status, address, phone number, social insurance number too. If this had ever gotten into the wrong hands, what a mess it could have been. Amy then began to wonder where the rest were. The warehouse factory was too large for only a handful of people. Where are the rest of you? She absent-mindedly asked the empty space. She flipped through until one caught her eye. Carrie Newton, she said out loud before pulling the tattered folder out. Her fingers moved smoothly, line by line. In the end, it was dark gray covered in dust. Amy wiped the dust dirty on her jeans. She picked up and laid down articles of all sorts. Some parts, others gossip. Some parts were gossip. Amy's mind constantly returned to Carrie Newton. She had his address in her hand, along with the telephone number. This information was from the 60s. Her chances were good he'd be there, or that the phone number was still in use. Amy made a note in her cell phone of the information. If she felt brave later, she'd call. As she placed the file back in its order, a small piece of paper floated to the ground. Amy bent over to pick it up. A photo of who must have been Carrie Newton. He was a young man when the photo was taken. As was customary, she turned it over. Deceased was written on the back. Amy took the file out once more, honestly reading it. There was no next of kin entered on the sheet. How sad, she quietly said, before putting the picture back in after one more glance. The shivers were continuing. Sure, it was the dampness. Amy made her way out and headed for home. Steps away from the parking lot, a light drizzle began. She never hurried. She loved the feel and sound of rain. She sat in her car, watching the rain bounce off the hood. Each new drop on the windshield made a new pattern. She had spent more time there than intended in the forest. She was content watching water fall from leaves remaining on the trees. The map she had referred to was dripping wet. Amy's thoughts had raced back to her childhood. Although she was staring out the windshield, she actually wasn't seeing until movement caught her attention. What is that? She squinted, attempting to recognize the shape. It can't be, Amy told herself. Absolutely can't be, she said once again. What Amy was looking at seemed to be a human form. It was moving among the trees, but none of the ground cover was disturbed. And I think I will leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this snippet of the story. And I will hopefully be able to make time to continue it tomorrow, as I will be baking all day. If you are new to my channel, please check out my other videos. If you find anything that you like, please give it a thumbs up, drop me a comment, and share it out with anyone you think would be interested. Those of you who have already subscribed, thank you for coming back again, and I hope you've enjoyed this installment. I'm sorry there's been so much time in between, but evenings do get away from me sometimes. But until the next, sleep tight.